I woke up to the familiar scent of leather chairs, stale coffee, and doom. Or maybe that was just my own panic. Because I wasn't me anymore. I was Jack, the CEO doomed to be humiliated by Linda and her sidekick gigolo, Leo. Classic abuse novel material. My predecessor had literally handed over everything to the sweet heroine, only to be framed, mocked, and ruined. Spoiler alert, he ended up dead. I glanced at the mirror in the office bathroom. Yep, handsome, sharp suit, CEO energy, all wasted on a character who was supposed to beg for forgiveness while Linda laughed like a villain in a bad soap opera. But you know what? I wasn't going to follow the script. Linda walked in 5 minutes later, all perfume and smugness, holding a contract with a flourish. Jack, or should I say, future ex-CEO, kneel and sign, or lose everything. I sighed because honestly, she looked like she was auditioning for villain of the century. But instead of trembling like the old Jack, I did something no one expected. I picked up a bottle of 1982 Lafite from the wine rack behind me. The vintage scream of corporate rebellion was real. And then I smashed it right into her face. Shards of glass sparkled in the sunlight. She screamed. Leo tried to intervene, and I gave him a gentle shove that sent him flopping like a fish out of water. "Gentlemen," I said to myself as I dusted off my suit, "the era of weak, apologetic CEOs is over. Also, do we have insurance for wine?" It was just the beginning. The conference room smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and lethal entitlement. Linda, now sporting a half-melted designer face, and a look that said this is not how my Instagram story goes, was frantically trying to blot the blood with a handkerchief that cost more than my first car. Leo was slumped on a couch pretending to be traumatized, which is the layperson's version of acting school debt manifesting. Grant, Linda's loyal yes-man, hovered like a drone with no chill. He kept glancing at me with the kind of hatred reserved for people who cancel subscriptions you forgot about. "Security," Linda shrieked, because that's the next step in the script. Call the minions, cry victim, livestream the narrative. But I wasn't interested in theatrics anymore. I was interested in receipts. I reached for my briefcase like a magician pulling a rabbit out of a hat, except the rabbit was a folder thick enough to bench press a small dog. I slapped it on the table and watched their faces go through the 5 stages of corporate collapse. Denial, confusion, sweating, panic, and denial again. "Proof," Linda squeaked. "Not proof," I said. "An X-ray." I flipped open the folder and laid out a neat stack of documents, bank transfers, signed approval memos, a few tax forms with suspiciously missing zeros, and an audio clip of Linda telling Grant to reroute the group funds temporarily. I'd spent the last 24 hours in the company's server like a raccoon in a bakery, and raccoons do not leave crumbs. "You can't," Grant started. "Oh, we can," I said, "because those temporarily rerouted funds went to a shell company named Lux Life Ventures. You'll notice the beneficiary is you, Linda. Also, $38 million is a lot of temporary." Leo's jaw actually dropped. For once, his acting couldn't hide the soul crunch. Linda's cheeks flushed a new shade, less rosy villainous and more deflated peacock. "You'll never get away with this," she hissed, voice wobbling like a cheap microphone. I tapped my phone. "I've already sent copies to the board, to legal, to the press desk, and to our external auditors. Also, fun fact, I placed a temporary freeze on your access. So, you can scream, but your bank app is going to be very, very quiet." She lunged. I stepped aside like a man who has practiced this in his head during meetings and awkward family dinners. Leo tried to defend her, but after I slammed the folder on the table and the facts hit him, he realized he had accidentally become an evidence exhibit. He looked smaller than a gigolo should. Tragic. Linda started bargaining like someone reading the wrong chapter of their life. "I'll mortgage my jewelry, my car, I'll sell my villa in Capri." "Do it," I said, "and sign it. You'll also repay the $38 million plus penalties. Full restitution. You and Grant will be escorted off the premises at 5 this evening, and from that moment on, you'll have exactly zero authority in this group." Grant, who had always thought he was indispensable, suddenly looked like a man who'd been replaced by an app. He tried to vomit excuses, but the spreadsheet of his sins made him sound like a bad accountant reading out his own obituary. By sunset, Linda handed over signed mortgage agreements, transfer instructions, and the keys to the luxury car, plus a dramatic, televised meltdown that our PR team handled on autopilot. Leo posted a tearful video blaming misunderstandings and youth, and then quietly unfollowed the company account. Social media moved on as it always does, but the company balance sheet would not. I watched them go, Linda with jewelry in a velvet pouch, and a face that no filter could fix, Grant with an ego in tatters, and Leo clutching a gym bag full of half-truths. Later, at a quiet bar near the office, I ordered a drink non-vintage. I wasn't reckless, and for the first time since I'd woken up in Jack's suit, I felt something close to satisfaction. Not because I'd won, revenge feels petty on its own, but because I'd chosen a different ending. The old Jack folded, the new Jack slammed the table. Also, I may have pocketed one of Linda's lesser but very shiny watches. Consider it a souvenir. After the dust settled, I realized two things. 1, revenge tastes way better with whiskey. And 2, the office was suddenly way too quiet without Linda's screaming echoing through the hallways. Enter Claire, the new CFO. Not only was she competent, but she also had the kind of dry humor that makes you snort into your latte while pretending it's totally normal. She walked in mid-morning, carrying a stack of spreadsheets and zero patience for melodrama. "Are you Jack, or the guy who just redecorated the office with old wine and corporate trauma?" she asked, deadpan. I smirked. "Depends on whether you consider glass a redesign or abstract art." She blinked, then laughed. That laugh, sharp, clear, confident, felt like sunlight cutting through a storm. Honestly, I was a CEO, not a lovesick fool, but my heart may have filed an HR complaint. Meanwhile, Leo had clearly not learned the lesson of the shattered 1982 Lafite. I noticed him lurking near the parking lot, eyeing the security cameras like he was plotting a heist from a bad 2000s movie. "Are you planning to hack the CCTV again?" I asked casually as he tiptoed past the reception. No, just stretching my legs," he mumbled, trying to act innocent while gripping what looked suspiciously like a grappling hook. I raised an eyebrow. Leo's attempts at villainy were almost cute, like a kitten trying to punch a pillow. Claire appeared behind me, arms crossed. "Let me guess, that's your ex-gigolo problem." "Yup," I said. "And if he breathes near my office again, he's going to experience firsthand what a corporate lawsuit tastes like." She grinned. "I like your style." We spent the afternoon going over finances, restructuring security protocols, and casually discussing how to make Leo's life as inconvenient as legally possible. By the end of it, I realized something. Claire wasn't just the brains. She was also the kind of woman who could survive this world of corporate villains without crying, or suing me for trauma. She was dangerous, in a good way. Later that evening, I watched Leo try to sneak into the server room again. This time, he tripped over a motion sensor, hit the alarm, and ended up tangled in a caution tape like a cat in a Halloween decoration. Claire and I watched from the security monitor, silently toasting ourselves with coffee. "New Jack," she said, "I think you're going to enjoy this job after all." I leaned back, thinking about how much more fun it is to man up, take what's yours, and leave the gigolos flopping on the floor. Also, maybe enjoy a little romance along the way. The office had turned into a post-apocalyptic landscape of corporate scheming. Linda's loyal minions were either fired, crying into their ergonomic chairs, or quietly updating LinkedIn profiles with the "Seeking New Opportunities" tagline. I decided it was time for a full sweep. First on the list, Grant. The guy still thought he could be useful, so I called him into my office. I kept it short. Grant, I said, hands clasped behind my back like a CEO who occasionally binge-watches spy movies for inspiration. You're either going to help rebuild this company honestly, or you're going to help pack your things. He tried a but and I raised an eyebrow. That's all it took. He crumbled faster than a cookie in a toddler's hand. Within the hour his desk was empty, and the only thing he left behind was a sad little plant. I named it Hope in my mind. Meanwhile, Claire and I had settled into a sort of war room camaraderie. She'd make snarky comments about the old Jack, and I'd retaliate with puns about corporate vampires and the undead ego of Leo. Somehow, it was flirting, but also extremely efficient team building. "Do you always run your empire like this?" Claire asked one afternoon, arms crossed over her blouse that was somehow both intimidating and chic. "Depends," I said, tossing a pen across the room without looking. It hit exactly where it needed to, not at all. If the villains are stupid enough to try me, yes. If they're competent, maybe slightly less smashing wine bottles. She smirked. "I like your style." Which, of course, made my chest puff up with CEO pride and possibly a hint of teenage crush energy. I refused to think about it as anything romantic. Definitely professional admiration. That night I reviewed the security footage again. Leo, the professional disaster, had tried to sneak in through the ventilation system. He got stuck halfway, banged on the metal for an hour, and eventually called for a rescue that the janitor kindly ignored. I almost felt bad, almost. I texted Claire, "Guess who's auditioning for Cirque du Soleil in the vents?" Her reply, "I hope he has insurance." We laughed. Hard. And just like that, the office felt less like a battlefield and more like, well, maybe like a weird, slightly savage family where I was somehow the dad, and she was the cooler, older sibling who secretly made me nervous. Just when I thought I could relax with Claire's dry humor and spreadsheets that didn't double as torture devices, the news popped up. Linda had somehow cobbled together a revenge plan from a beach villa in the Maldives. She hired a few private investigators, a social media influencer, and get this, a guru life coach who specialized in making CEOs cry in luxury hotels. I sighed. Some villains never learn. Claire leaned over my shoulder, peering at the emails and screenshots I'd collected. "Let me guess, she's trying to smear the company's reputation." "Exactly," I said, sipping my coffee with the smug satisfaction of someone who knows the villain plan is mostly hot air. Step 1, buy a villa. Step 2, post dramatic Instagram stories. Step 3, cry about 1982 Lafite online. Step 4, absolutely fail. Step 4 was my favorite because I had proof. Every shady contract, every questionable account transfer, every melodramatic diary entry she thought was private, it was all documented. I forwarded it to the board with a subject line, "For your entertainment, Linda too." Leo, of course, tried to tag along remotely, pretending to be helpful. His Zoom call background was a green screen of mountains, and he spent 15 minutes explaining how strategic leaks can influence stock prices. I muted him and watched Claire chuckle. "You know," she said, "this could be boring if it weren't so hilarious. You actually make corporate justice fun." I smirked. Boring is for CEOs who kneel. We smash bottles and embezzlers. The next day, Linda tried to leak false rumors about me embezzling company funds on social media. I countered with screenshots, bank statements, and a very politely worded but legally terrifying letter. Within an hour, she had been blocked from posting about the company on any verified channel. Her influencer friends ghosted her, and Leo sent a text, "Help." Claire leaned against my desk, arms crossed. "Do you ever sleep?" "Sleep is for weak CEOs and ex-gigolos stuck in vents," I replied. By the end of the week, Linda had attempted about 5 grand revenge gestures, including a viral TikTok meltdown and a very elaborate paper plane attack at the company's headquarters, which security politely confiscated. All of them failed. All of them were pathetic. Meanwhile, Claire and I started sneaking in late-night strategy sessions. Sometimes we debated over company restructuring, sometimes over who would win in a fight, a CEO with a bottle of vintage wine or a gigolo with zero athletic skills. Spoiler, the answer was obvious. By Monday, the office had settled into a new normal. No Linda, no Leo, and no Grant. Just me, Claire, and an army of terrified but loyal employees who had learned very quickly that crossing me now came with severe consequences and sometimes a shattered wine bottle. Claire and I were in my office, going over quarterly projections when I noticed her smirk. "What?" I asked, suspicious. "You're smiling," she said, "and it's not because of the spreadsheets. I think you might actually be enjoying being the CEO." "Huh," I said, trying to sound casual, which came out more like a growl. "CEO is fun, but untouchable CEO, that's even better." I leaned back in my chair, letting the weight of power settle over me like a leather jacket. Being untouchable felt good. Very good. There's a difference between surviving a corporate nightmare and thriving while everyone who wronged you flails helplessly. Meanwhile, Leo had not given up. Oh no, he had escalated. This time, he sent a dozen roses to the office with a note that said, "For the CEO I almost betrayed, forgive me." I stared at the flowers. Claire stared at the flowers. The entire office collectively sighed. "Do I need to explain this?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," I said, because apparently in his brain flowers equals absolution. Spoiler, they don't. I drafted a savage but polite reply. "Dear Leo, your flowers are appreciated as much as your professional competence. 0. Kindly return to your safe space and remain there." Claire snorted. "You're brutal, I like it." We spent the afternoon locking down security, multi-factor authentication on everything, new background checks, and a network of cameras that even James Bond would envy. As I explained the new system, I noticed Claire watching me with a tilt of her head. "Is this always how you operate?" she asked. "Depends," I said, leaning closer to her desk. "Is this a question about corporate security or something else?" Her smirk widened. "Maybe both." I almost choked on my coffee. Almost. Just when I thought the office couldn't get more entertaining, a new problem landed on my desk like a paper plane with a grudge. One of our largest clients had suddenly threatened to pull out unless we restructured leadership, because apparently Linda's melodramatic legacy had left them traumatized. I looked at Claire. "Do you feel like sending them a fruit basket?" She laughed. "Or a very polite legal letter." I smirked. "I vote legal letter with extra sarcasm." By lunch, we had drafted a response so savage it could have doubled as a roast special. Concise, factual, and sprinkled with just enough humor to make them question their life choices. "Your concerns are noted. Perhaps you were expecting a CEO who kneels at the mention of vintage wine. Unfortunately, you have me instead." Claire peeked at the draft. "Bold, I like it." I leaned back, enjoying the subtle thrill of finally being the CEO who actually fights back. Meanwhile, the old Jack's legacy of tears and apologies felt like a bad dream. I had reclaimed not just the company, but my dignity. Of course, Leo tried to make a comeback again. This time, he emailed a confidential tip claiming insider info about my financials. I forwarded it to Claire without reading it. She opened it, snorted, and said, "Oh, this is adorable. He thinks this will work." I laughed. "We should frame it and put it in the office for morale." Later, during a quiet moment, Claire leaned on my desk, her presence dangerously close. "You're kind of fun when you're this savage," she murmured. "Kind of fun? That's CEO-level approval," I said, pretending to be casual while internally recalculating my heart rate. "Should I take that as a compliment or a warning?" She smirked, the kind of smirk that makes spreadsheets irrelevant. "Both." The office had settled into a new rhythm. Claire running interference with intelligence, me running interference with sheer audacity, and the employees cautiously hoping they didn't get caught in our crossfire. Then came the perfect opportunity for a little extra corporate carnage. A competitor, clearly inspired by Linda's old drama, tried to poach half my team with promises of free snacks and casual Fridays. I smiled. "Claire," I said, waving a spreadsheet like a weapon, "time for a lesson in why messing with Jack is a terrible idea." By noon, we had launched a counteroffensive so meticulously savage it would have made Sun Tzu blush. Job offers were blocked, contracts sweetened with bonuses, and a few cleverly leaked, CEO's next move, hints got the rival scrambling. Leo, of course, was watching from afar, probably weeping over a latte in some generic cafe. Meanwhile, Claire and I were locked in strategy mode. I'd toss ideas she'd critique, and every so often our hands would brush over a pile of documents. Each accidental touch was followed by a smirk, an eyebrow raise, or a witty jab about strategic contact. Romance was creeping in slowly but deliberately, like a cat plotting a pounce. "Don't get distracted," I said, though my voice wobbled slightly, mostly because Claire's smirk was dangerously effective. "I'm not distracted," she said, tapping my files. "I'm supervising." "Right, totally supervising." By late afternoon, the chaos had been contained. The rival company left licking its wounds, and Leo had sent an emergency smoke signal, metaphorically. He had literally sent a gif of a panicked hamster. I forwarded it to Claire. "Adorable," she said, shaking her head, "like a tiny, incompetent villain." "Exactly," I said, "and we're their nightmare." The day ended with us sitting side by side in the office, sipping coffee and reviewing financials. My hand brushed hers again. This time she didn't pull away. She smirked, leaned just a little closer, and whispered, "You're impossible." I smiled, and yet irresistible. Just when I thought Linda's melodrama had run its course, she launched her final desperate attempt. A series of emails threatening legal action, social media smears, and vague insinuations about hidden scandals that apparently didn't exist. I leaned back in my chair and muttered, "Bless her heart, she's still trying." Claire peeked over my shoulder, smirking. "Do you want me to draft a polite, 'Please stop embarrassing yourself' letter?" I grinned. "Make it savage but polite, like a CEO version of tea with lemon." Within an hour, the response went out. It included screenshots, receipts, and references to every ridiculous stunt Linda had pulled. Leo attempted a cameo, pretending he had additional insider information, but Claire and I barely looked up. We were in full-on, untouchable CEO mode. Later, Claire and I ended up in the server room, because apparently that's where all the action happens in our office. The air was tense. Technical jargon flew between us, but underneath it there was an unspoken game of proximity. Her hand brushed mine as we reached for the same cable. I didn't pull away. "Careful," she said, voice teasing. "You might start a spark in the server room." "Or a fire," I whispered, leaning just slightly closer. The monitors glowed in our faces, highlighting her smirk and my mischievous grin. Meanwhile, Leo outside was posting another desperate social media plea. This time, it included a meme of a cat tangled in cables, captioned, "CEO defeat imminent." I forwarded it to Claire. She laughed. "He's tragic." "Yes," I agreed, "but also highly entertaining." By now, the office had learned one universal truth. Jack doesn't beg, Jack doesn't apologize. And Jack absolutely destroys anyone who tries to mess with him. I spent the morning consolidating power, tightening contracts, auditing accounts, and making sure that any lingering Linda loyalists knew that stepping out of line meant instant termination and public humiliation. Claire hovered beside me, occasionally tossing in witty remarks that made my smirk widen. "You're enjoying this too much," she said, as I sent a particularly savage email to a minor competitor who had the audacity to complain. "Enjoyment is part of the CEO package," I replied. along with sarcasm, strategic brilliance, and, apparently, dangerously good taste in CFOs. Her eyes sparkled. Dangerous, huh? I leaned closer, almost close enough to make her shiver. Depends on who's asking. Meanwhile, Leo had attempted another comeback, this time staging a ridiculous whistleblower stunt in the lobby. Security intercepted him before he could even reach the elevator. I watched the footage with Claire, who nearly spilled her coffee laughing. "Why does he keep doing this?" she asked, still giggling. "Because he hasn't learned yet," I said, "and watching him fail is poetic." By the afternoon, the company was untouchable, the rival factions crushed, and Linda's name was now synonymous with epic failure on the internet. But the real highlight, Claire and I had accidentally, or maybe intentionally, ended up working elbow to elbow all day. Every accidental touch, shared glance, and playful jab escalated the tension until the air between us was practically electric. At one point, she leaned over my shoulder, whispering, "You're impossible." "And yet irresistible," I replied. Her smirk said everything and nothing. But one thing was clear. The flirtation was no longer subtle, and the sparks were about to become a wildfire. Just when I thought I'd mastered the CEO life, and Claire and I were comfortably dancing around flirtation, an unexpected curveball hit. One of our overseas partners suddenly threatened to pull out unless we met some urgent demands. I raised an eyebrow. Urgent, or are they just trying to catch the old Jack? Claire leaned over the documents, smirking. "They clearly haven't met you yet." I grinned. "Then it's time to show them what new Jack looks like." By noon, we had crafted a response so savage it included a subtle roast, undeniable proof of our dominance, and just enough wit to make the other side sweat. Claire added a few strategic suggestions, her brilliance shining like the sun. As we worked side by side, our playful banter escalated. "Stop distracting me," I said as her elbow brushed mine. "I'm not distracting you," she replied, voice teasing. "I'm quality control." "Quality control, huh? Sounds like code for I want to annoy you until you notice me." She laughed, leaning closer. "Maybe it is." Meanwhile, Leo, true to form, was plotting something absurd again. This time, he had hired a street performer to leave warning messages in front of the company building. Security, of course, intercepted him, and Claire and I watched the footage, laughing until we almost fell off our chairs. "Do you ever get tired of winning?" she asked, smirking. "Winning is my cardio," I replied. By now, the office had fully accepted one fact. Jack is untouchable, unflappable, and undeniably entertaining. Even the janitors knew to give him a wide berth when he was in savage CEO mode. Claire and I had started spending more time together outside of work under the guise of strategic meetings. In reality, these meetings involved coffee, laughter, and the occasional accidental brush of hands that left both of us grinning like idiots. One afternoon, while reviewing expansion plans, I noticed her smirk. "What?" I asked, suspicious. "You're enjoying this too much," she said. "Enjoyment is mandatory," I replied, leaning back. "Along with sarcasm, strategic brilliance, and keeping my CFO dangerously entertained." She rolled her eyes but didn't pull away. "Dangerously, huh?" "Depends on who's asking," I said. Meanwhile, Leo had apparently graduated to international embarrassment level. His latest stunt involved trying to bribe a delivery driver to sneak a fake legal notice into the office. The driver instead delivered flowers to Claire's desk with a note. "Stop being amazing, Jack." Claire laughed so hard she nearly spilled her coffee. I couldn't help but join in. He's tragic, but also highly entertaining. By the evening, the company was stronger than ever. Contracts were secured, rivals neutralized, and Linda was a cautionary tale circulating on social media. But the highlight, Claire and I, sitting side by side, hands occasionally brushing over spreadsheets, and that playful tension simmering just below the surface. "Jack," she said softly, leaning closer, "you're impossible." And yet irresistible, I replied, closing the laptop just slightly so we could share a smirk. Just when I thought Linda's saga was over, she tried one last desperate move. A dramatic appearance at a charity gala, dressed like a villain straight out of a telenovela, complete with tears, glitter, and what I assume was supposed to be a menacing glare. Claire and I watched from the VIP section, amused. Is she trying to be threatening or tragic? I asked. Both, Claire said, snickering, and failing spectacularly at both. She tried to call the press over, claiming I had embezzled funds or stolen her destiny, but we were prepared. Within minutes, a friendly PR officer, armed with receipts, bank statements, and photographic proof of Linda's misdeeds, calmly escorted her away from the cameras. Leo, naturally, was nearby, attempting to pull off a heroic save. He tripped over a table, knocking over a tray of champagne, and narrowly avoided impaling himself on a decorative statue. Claire and I nearly fell off our chairs laughing. "Do you ever get tired of winning?" she whispered, still giggling. "Winning is mandatory," I replied, "especially when it comes with entertainment like this." Later, as the gala wound down, Claire and I found ourselves alone on the balcony. The city lights reflected off the water below, and for the first time the air between us wasn't just playful tension, it was undeniable chemistry. "Jack," she said softly, stepping a little closer, "you're impossible." "And yet irresistible," I replied, closing the gap just enough to make her shiver without saying a word. With Linda finally out of the picture and Leo reduced to a cautionary meme, the office felt like it had entered a new golden era. Jack's empire wasn't just secure, it was untouchable. Every rival, competitor, and ex-employee knew better than to even think about challenging him. Claire and I were in the boardroom reviewing the final restructuring plans. Her sharp eyes caught every detail, her voice calm but teasing as she said, "You know, you really do enjoy this too much." "I call it strategic enjoyment," I said, leaning casually against the table. "And you," I added, smirking, "make it dangerously fun." She raised an eyebrow. "Dangerously fun, huh?" "Depends on who's asking," I said, stepping closer. Our shoulders brushed over the piles of documents. The tension wasn't subtle anymore. It was a slow burn that neither of us was willing to extinguish. Meanwhile, Leo had attempted one last minor stunt, leaving a bouquet of flowers with a note saying, "Forgive me, Jack." I forwarded it to Claire with a single line, "Tragic, again." She laughed. "You really have a way with him." "Or he has a way of being hilarious without meaning to," I said. By the end of the day, the company was fully stabilized. Linda's remaining assets had been seized, the public scandal handled, and Jack's reputation was untouchable. But the highlight: Claire and I had spent the day side by side, laughing, teasing, and flirting openly. Hands brushed over contracts, shoulders bumped while strategizing, and every glance carried that spark neither of us could ignore. "Jack," she said softly, leaning just a little closer, "you're impossible." "And yet irresistible," I whispered, closing the distance enough that our smiles met without needing words. The final chapter of Linda's melodrama and Jack's epic comeback was nothing short of legendary. The board meeting that morning was more ceremonial than functional. Linda, gone; Leo, a laughingstock circulating online as a cautionary tale; Grant, long forgotten; the company, untouchable; and me, sitting at the head of the table with Claire by my side, radiating that perfect combination of savage CEO energy and dangerously charming confidence. Claire leaned in as I presented the final report. "You know," she said, smirking, "you make revenge look fun." "Fun is part of the CEO package," I said, brushing a strand of hair from her face with a sly grin. "Along with sarcasm, strategy, and keeping my CFO dangerously entertained." She raised an eyebrow. "Dangerously entertained, huh?" "Depends on who's asking," I replied, stepping closer. The tension we'd been building over the past chapters was now palpable, sizzling in the air like electricity. The final insult to Linda's legacy came via press release. All evidence of her embezzlement, manipulation, and ridiculous antics was now public, accompanied by a classy note on how Jack's new leadership had restored the company's honor. The media ate it up. The internet roasted her. I could practically hear the collective groan of every petty villain who had ever underestimated me. As the meeting wrapped, Claire and I found ourselves alone in my office. The city lights reflected in the windows, the night air filled with possibility. "You're impossible," she whispered again, stepping closer than anyone had dared before. "And yet irresistible," I murmured, closing the gap. This time no teasing, no subtlety. Just a shared grin, a spark igniting between us, and the sense that we'd both survived every absurd obstacle and come out stronger, together. 5 years had passed. The company was thriving under Jack's and Claire's leadership, their empire untouchable, and the ghosts of Linda, Leo, and Grant were just funny anecdotes in office history. But outside the boardroom, life had changed. Jack sipped his morning coffee while balancing a toddler on his knee. Claire, effortlessly chic even in yoga pants, was managing breakfast chaos, laughing as the kids squabbled over a toy robot. "Dad, you can't eat that cookie," shouted little Leo Jr., pointing a tiny finger. "Yes, I can," Jack replied with mock seriousness. "I'm the CEO of this kitchen now." Claire rolled her eyes but laughed. "And the CEO of chaos," she added, ruffling his hair. The home was a mix of laughter, mild destruction, and love, the perfect sequel to their previously savage, high-stakes lives. Even with a family, Jack and Claire's professional lives remained unstoppable. They occasionally brought the kids to the office for special CEO observation days, where little hands inevitably pressed buttons they shouldn't, causing mild panic, but also universal delight among the staff. One day, as Jack explained strategy to the board, his youngest climbed onto the table, waving a toy sword. "Protect the empire, Daddy," he declared. Claire whispered, grinning, "You see, the next generation of CEOs is ready." Jack smirked, "Or future rebels just like their dad." Even Leo's name had become a running joke in the office. Remember when someone thought they could outsmart Jack? Every time, Jack and Claire shared a look, remembering how far they'd come. By sunset, Jack and Claire sat on the balcony of their family home, kids playing in the garden below. The city skyline shimmered in the distance, a reminder of everything they'd built together, from vengeance to love, from chaos to stability. Jack wrapped an arm around Claire. "You know," he said, "I still can't believe we survived all that." Claire leaned into him, smiling. "Not only survived, we thrived, and we did it together." Their kids ran over, pulling them into a giant, chaotic hug. Jack laughed, Claire laughed, the children laughed, and in that moment nothing else mattered. The empire was secure, their revenge complete, and their love untouchable. And so Jack and Claire lived happily ever after, a perfect balance of savage brilliance, laughter, and family love.